Welcome back to another episode of EV Obsession with your hosts, plural, Zachary Shahan, Joe Boris, and I'm just at a complete and utter loss for words because I posted an anti-EV hysteric making fun of meme on Facebook, and it's occurred to me that these people are too stupid to make fun of. They can't even tell when they are the joke. So joke's on me, I guess. I'm going to come into this one a little bit depressed, but hey, Zachary's here to brighten my day, brighten your day, and we're all going to talk about EVs and what wonderful things they are. Zachary, welcome to today's show.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we before this show, we were just talking about some ridiculous levels of stupidity that we've experienced recently.
It's like layer upon layer of stupidity that
exactly.
like it's just a whole different kind of
it's crazy. So we will leave that for a bloopers maybe. I mean, we didn't record it, but we can talk about it as it's like a blooper show or something.
It's like a blooper show. It's like, turn off your cell phones. They're tracking you. It's like, but they're tracking you now. That's how they have you in the system.
Yeah, well, we'll throw it at the end. I don't know what we'll do with it. We'll see. But we both had crazy stories this week, and it's scary. But I think it's appropriate then actually that we're going to start with this one, which when I first saw it, I was like, oh, is that an issue? When I saw news about it.
Apparently it is.
And then David Waterworth did a great job tearing it apart. Will electric cars collapse multi-story car parks or parking garages, as we say in the US?
Parking garage. Can we change that? Because like literally no one has any idea what that a car park is.
Yeah, I mean we can change it and put multi-story. I don't know. We can, but it's yeah, that's the way they say it in England and Australia and
all those other countries that we gained independence from.
Criminals. Yeah, so the idea here is that with EVs being heavier because of batteries, the parking garages are going to potentially collapse around the world as more EVs are adopted. And David did a really good job pulling different sources together and highlighting how we've gone from smaller cars to larger and larger cars, and that it's really the bigger issue is all the giant vehicles people drive around.
Absolutely, man. You know, I was talking to my buddy Mike that I do the heavy equipment podcast with, and we were talking about the right tool for the right job. And if you look at a vehicle like a Gem, which is essentially a golf cart with a pickup bed, it's got like an 800-pound payload and a pickup bed the same size as what you get on a crew cab F-150. That's 6.5-foot bed. So you're really only giving up like 200 pounds of capacity, but you can carry mulch, you can carry tools, you can carry your crew. And it's this little tiny plug-in EV that if you're a college campus or you're a local business, it'll do 99% of the work that you need. And it weighs like half as much as a Nissan Leaf. So the issue is not EVs. The issue is very clearly this kind of bizarre need to constantly have bigger and bigger vehicles. And, you know, we should write, I'm going to write this exact article. I'm going to take it word for word, and I'm just going to change the headline to fat people and big trucks are going to destroy America's parking garages.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, yeah. So
put down the cheeseburger, ma'am. Get out of your Suburban.
He got to was that no, there's no evidence. Here's from the British Parking Association. No UK car parks have banned electric cars. They said that there was no evidence to show that the weight of electric cars is an issue. While we recognize that large cars with bigger and more expensive batteries weigh more, the issue is not specific to electric cars. And yeah, that's the story. So, I mean, you can read the article for a host of details, but just debunking a popular anti-EV story that's been going around. I mean, it's not necessarily 100% anti-EV. They're just like, oh, we have to fix parking garages, make them better because EVs have big batteries.
Well, and he picks a really famous building in Chicago. It's one of the corn cob
apartments. I found that one.
Oh, yeah? That's awesome. So like, I got to tell you, I can't believe that more people haven't backed out of that thing and fallen right into the river.
Oh, I was just like, wow, that's an interesting parking garage. Like it's very, it's yeah, very open.
Yeah, so a lot of people paid a lot of money to live in that house, and the whole basic idea of it is that there are no straight lines in nature, so that this organic looking building, the apartment buildings have like the rooms, the apartments in the building don't have like straight flat walls, so they're all this like weird conical parabolic shape. And I've actually been in there, and it's, I don't know, I don't care, I didn't care for it.
I'm familiar with that concept. I'm not at all familiar with the building or the parking garage. It was just
Yeah, it's, if you go to Google and just, you know, search for Chicago corncob buildings, you'll see it. And that's what they look like. They look like two big corn cobs sticking out of the middle of the city.
yeah, and well, that's yeah, a lot of interesting stuff there. But there is one quote from where is it? The Telegraph, which is not a source I would normally recommend, but there's a structural engineer was quoted there saying, I don't want to be too alarmist, but there definitely is the potential for some of the early car parks in poor condition to collapse. I think this is just an issue of aging infrastructure that we have, like we've seen
Yeah.
with bridges in the US. And I mean, we built a lot of stuff a long time ago that's still standing and expected to last forever, it seems like, sometimes with
Well, I
growth.
think a lot of these things were built in the 40s and 50s, and the mindset of Americans was very different then. Remember that we only had three channels. We had a very homogenous culture, certainly along the lines of middle class white Americans throughout most of the 50s and into the early 60s. And there was a real, genuine belief that we were all going to live in space, that
Yeah.
technology was just advancing so quickly. The Jetsons were going to like be in 2023 or 2024, that this was just how things were going. And within 100 years, we'd be living among the stars. So when they built out these projects and they said, oh, this garage will last for 50, 60 years, they did not believe that we would all still be using this infrastructure 50, 60, 70 years later. They were never built for this. So
Yeah, I do.
it's tough. It's tough to really wrap our heads around that.
Yeah, I do remember the 40s and 50s Joe. No, how old do you think I am, man? What the heck?
Man,
Seriously?
you were a kid growing up in Florida about the same time I was, not too
Yeah.
far from the Space Coast. And I remember as a kid in the early 80s reading books about how by the year 2000, we'll have colonies on the moon.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, okay, I watched the Jetsons in the 80s and 90s, and I feel like that was like a dream scenario, but not one that I took as realistic and like, oh, we really might live in, but it was like semi real, like, oh, could that be a future? But when you, the way you talked about it, I'm like, maybe for in the 40s and 50s, that really was what they expected. I
It
don't
was.
know.
I mean, that's why they keep talking about flying cars. Whenever you talk to a baby boomer about self-driving cars, they're like, we were supposed to have flying cars by now, but instead we have pictures of dinner on the internet. It's like,
Yeah, well, the flying
yeah, well,
cars
you
dream
didn't
lives
build a
on.
flying car. I don't know what to tell you.
Lives on. The thing that with all the hyper electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft and flying taxis and stuff, thing I just kept thinking was like, is that really gonna, like, how is that really gonna be better? How's traffic all over the air? How is traffic all over the air above us gonna really be better than traffic all over the ground?
Well, I think that the mistake is in assuming that you and I will ever be able to afford that. What it's going to be,
But
it's going to be more common than current helicopters, but I think it's going to be about as common as like when you go to Lyft or Uber. Like I use Lyft a lot because Uber's CEO originally was troublesome and I didn't want to associate with him. So there's like the Lux, the, you know, the Lyft Black Lux XL,
yeah,
where you can basically get picked up in an Escalade or a Bentley Bentayga or something and get driven somewhere. I've clicked that button a couple of times just because of like where I was going or who I was going to meet, and that's a pricey upgrade. I suspect that the people who regularly summon these kind of vehicles or who already employ someone to drive them around in the back of a Escalade or something, This is a service. EVTOL is something that they're going to be able to use and enjoy. And for us, we're just not going to share the road with the rich people anymore.
Or the people with Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and including the influencers who can't really afford them but have to be there. So
they're the ones that are selecting
there will be
Lyft
in the
Ultra
air.
Sporty XL.
They're like, look at this that I made with all my fortunes from being on Instagram. Yep.
Stop. If I had that kind of body.
This is a really fun one that you picked out that I think we've written about this before, but I don't.
Oh, have we? I never saw it, and I've been sitting on it for a little bit because I wanted to write about it. This is a neat car. So this is.
Well, I'll just say I'm not sure. Like maybe we've written about similar vehicles, but
yeah, but
cool.
What makes this one cool is that it's a quadricycle. You don't need any kind of license, at least more advanced than like a moped license, to drive this thing, which is just absolutely bonkers to me that you can put something like this on the street and it's basically like a golf cart or an NEV, and you can cruise around in it and it's got a cool little look to it. I can definitely imagine, taking my son or daughter to school in this and just having them flip out at how exciting this is a vehicle to be seen in and be around in.
Totally, yeah, I love it. It's like the best version of the Elio, right?
Well, it doesn't have those nonsensical 3 wheels.
This is very cool. I mean, the thing that always gets me with this kind of thing, there's a nostalgia to it from an era that I did not live in, but I feel the nostalgia heavily. And I'm like, how is that? How does it get me when I didn't live in that era? Unless we're talking reincarnation and stuff, but I mean, is it from the influence of movies? Is it just...
So for me, it's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. When Toad loses his mind from Wind in the Willows, and Toad kind of sees that yellow vintage roadster, and he looks at it, he's like, a motor car, and his mind goes insane and he has to have it, and he leaps behind the wheel and starts tear-assing all over the 100-acre wood or wherever he is. And that to me has always been like the character from fiction that I was really kind of associated with. Like the first time you see one of these, you just have to leap into it and drive the snot out of it. And this looks like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Like his Wild Ride car from 1929 or whatever probably had 13 horsepower. That's about what this has.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that, but I feel like it's stuff like Sherlock Holmes or old Bond or old Poirot or something like this kind of stuff. Kind of probably is how I get it, but still, I mean, it's the same like with the VW bus that I've talked about before. Like, I don't know why, but I'm hugely drawn to that nostalgia, the appeal of the new one because of the old one, even though I have no real connection at all to that old one. It just, it's an era that I know I learned about. I probably watched some VH1 documentaries in the 90s.
Right. Or some really good videos, like some good music videos.
Deeply affected me at 10 years old. I don't know. Yeah,
no, I like it.
It is very cool. I love it in front of the Eiffel Tower there. I mean, it's just there's 3. Let me see if I can expand this for oh yeah, I should have had that the whole time. Oh, look at that. Oh, the wood.
This thing is just perfect. I would love to tool around in this thing and just get around town, get around Oak Park. This is great.
That's not the most flattering angle, but that reminds me of Little Rascals, their boxcar racing.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is great.
I mean, again, you can say that it's not the most flattering angle. Honestly, they're all kind of ridiculous angles. I love that it's got fat tire bicycle wheels and Bafang e-bike motors pushing it along.
Yeah, I know.
It's so good. Funny.
It's probably not going to outsell the Tesla Model Y, but I feel like we could talk about it for an hour and just be having the best show of our lives.
I know, but the whole conversation is going to be like, look how good this is. This is so good.
I want that, but I will
Morgan
never get it.
tried to do this. There's a British firm, Morgan.
Oh, that's
that has always, they've always done things kind of their own way. And they tried to do this as a 3-wheeler. And there's been a couple of others that tried that. But they've never really been successful. I think this is the way to try to make it a quadricycle and bring it in with low mass and bicycle tires and a low top speed and just literally make it a neighborhood vehicle.
Yeah, I
This
mean,
is so fun.
yeah, I'm eager to see where this goes. And I thought there was a typo in the headline because Patak Rodster, it's a Slovakian company, but it's called the Rodster, not the Roadster. So
It's
it's
Slovakian. That's interesting. I would have thought it was Indian.
yeah, Slovakia-based Patak Motor. Yeah, Patak is a very Indian name. Maybe it's an Indian who lives in Slovakia. I don't know. But yeah, that's fun. We'll
That's fun. Next.
go to a different kind of fun. First of all, Mike Bernard is just excellent at creating images in Midjourney, and Midjourney way better than DALL-E for AI generated images. But he's phenomenal at what he does with those. But this is a long story edited like at 2 a.m. last night or something. So good luck with what I remember from it. But there was some key stuff here which made me put in here. But basically, there's a few things to say. So I'm going to avoid all the China, I mean all the Canada oil industry stuff, because what's most interesting here to me is the China stuff, where Sinopec, which is basically state owned China state owned oil and gas company that, as Mike Bernard says, is basically the oil and gas industry in China. So it's that big. It's like, throw Exxon and Chevron and whatever together. So they are saying that 2023 is the year of peak gasoline demand in China. So this is the China state oil and gas company / industry saying this is the year of peak gas demand in China. That's huge.
Yeah, that is huge. And that is like an admission of we have moved past it. I think it's worth pointing out here that we're never, this is a bad way to say this. I'm going to just say it and I'll let you edit this and clean it up for me in like some kind of paraphrasing way. We're not done with fossil fuels in the sense that there is no longer a need for petroleum, because we do have plastics and used petroleum based products in the manufacturing of EVs and other things like cosmetics and additives and medicines and things like that. So there is still a need for petroleum, whether it's virgin petroleum, recycled, reused. I don't think that's really what I'm trying to get at here. But I don't think that there's going to be a need to burn it as fuel. And that's really a key difference, because it's the burning of the fossil fuels, it's the release of those hydrocarbons back into the atmosphere, reversing the process of carbon sequestration that happened for millions and millions of years before we started burning this stuff. That's what's leading to this harmful, devastating, cataclysmic climate change. So I think for China to say that and for China to be accelerating things in that direction, I think is huge. And, it should be celebrated, right? Like, yay, we're kind of hopefully past this.
Yeah, and Mike has another article, something like the only industry fossil fuels are needed for, and I haven't read that one, but I have a feeling he's saying the only industry that needs fossil fuels is the fossil fuel industry. But because I think there are a lot of alternatives developing for a lot of other stuff, but it's really the burning of oil and gas that is the primary part of the industry and what causes all the harm. And
that's correct. And that's true of biodiesel. That's true of LPG. That's true of compressed natural gas. It's not what we burn for fuel, it's that we burn for fuel.
Yeah, and I think there were a couple other things here. One is, well, he's chastising the Canadian oil industry. I said I wouldn't talk about it, but they're based in Calgary, and he's basically saying they're acting like 4-year-olds, acting like this is not happening, saying, yelling, plugging their ears, yelling la 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 la, while contrasting that with Sinopec, like straight up saying it. He also talks a little bit about the coal industry in China that's hyped too much for building new coal plants. He's like, they're replacing really old inefficient plants with new ones. They're building plants that they hardly use just as like a backup, basically. They're peak everything. And he's got, runs through like how they're leading on electrified high-speed rail, electric shipping with boats, all different things. So just they're sprinting ahead, and they're telling us, peak oil and gas is here in China, and globally not that far off of China either. And then here's one, this is I mean, this is not news exactly. This is Joe reviewing the Genesis GV70. So I should say I have almost nothing to say about this, and I feel like Joe might have a lot to say about it. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, well, we talked about this one on an earlier episode, one of the very first episodes of EV Obsession. I actually tried to do the episode from the car, and we'll try to do that again, I think, because I have the BZ 4x Toyota right now, and that one really needs to have an inside sort of episodic kind of thing. But the review itself kind of focuses on how good this thing is. Like, I put this Genesis up there at least the equal of anything else I've driven in this space. I think it's at least as good as the Mercedes EQ, the EQB SUV. I think it's at least as good as the Model Ys I've been in. I think it's actually quite a bit nicer place to be in terms of what I consider quality car things, like the softness of the seats, the comfort, the quiet, the lack of road noise, the solid thunk of the doors, the paint quality, things that I geek out about. I think it's all there. I love that when I open the hood on these electrified Genesis vehicles, I actually see stuff. I see like the cooling, the battery cooling, things like that. So you can go to the Cars and Coffee, pop the hood, and you can hang out like you're one of the cool kids. I love that. This is an interesting picture because I really thought that this was going to be a very cramped cargo bay because of the dramatic sloping of the greenhouse towards the rear of the vehicle, but it actually has quite a bit more room than I thought. I think the same is true of the Mach E. It actually has quite a bit of room back there.
Just like the Model Y.
Yeah, just like the Model Y as well. There's actually a bit more room in there than you think.
Yeah, and with the Model Y, we measured it against the Mach E, and it ended up the Model Y had more space. And
yeah, I could see that.
I know people who think the ID4 has more space and the Mach E have more space, and it's deceiving. That sloping, it depends on how deep that goes. How much it goes from the bumper to the back of the seats.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that sloping off drops the height. So I think that's what deceives people.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the body line of the GV70, there's a lot of real estate from the top of the tire to the base of that rear window to that C pillar. And that's very deceptive because it makes the whole car look smaller, and it makes that sloping greenhouse look a lot more dramatically sloped than it is. It's a really nice visual trick of the eyes to convince you that you're driving something sportier than you really are. You can see it there in that profile. The direct profile, it's not that sloped.
Yeah, it just looks, it's not that sloped from here exactly. And it looks to me very luxurious, and it just looks a bit like a Mercedes. Like, that's the closest brand or car I would compare it to. Like, I feel like it's competing with those Mercedes small SUVs, medium sized SUVs. And I mean, just for something about it, just like says luxury to me.
Yeah, and it's luxury in a way that a lot of vehicles do not present today. And I go into this, and I go into a lot of the positive things about it. There's a couple of fun gimmicks in there, like the automatic seat adjustment, where it like kind of feels your vibe and your weight and your height and everything, and it suggests a seating position for you. For me, it was fantastic. I loved it. I got into the BZ4X and it did not have that. And within like 3 minutes of driving it, I had like hip pain and I had to like readjust my whole deal. So I really miss that. I would love to have that back. I love this car. The thing that I didn't like, if you look at the curb, those door sills, the door panel goes all the way down to the bottom of the vehicle. There's a really good reason for that. So when you drive through salt and snow and mud and everything else, and it sprays on the side of the vehicle, as you get out of the car, if your legs touch that rocker panel, you get dirt and snow and grime all over your pants or your dress or whatever you're wearing that day. And because I wear a lot of dresses, and it's really upsetting because you do get those stains and everything else. And they did a really smart thing by taking that door all the way down so that the door gets it. You open the door and that door sill is always clean, except for what you drag in and out with your shoes, but that's on you. The problem is it goes so low that I was constantly hitting the door, whether the corner or scraping the bottom of it along the curb. And these are not crazy curbs. If you look at the original featured image, it's not like a crazy curb. It's a very standard suburban curb. And when we drove this thing into the city of Chicago, and so it was hitting the ground there. And when we drove it into Chicago, it was actually, the curb was significantly higher in downtown. We couldn't open the door. So I had to pull out of the spot, let my wife and kids out on the passenger side, and then park. And to me, I think that's a deal breaker. That's unforgivable. I spend way too much time in cities that have street parking. So I couldn't do this. If it was going to live in my garage or I had a driveway, I might never notice this problem. When I lived in Florida, I never street parked a car one time in my life until I moved to Chicago. So it's probably a non-issue for most drivers. But yeah, for me, it was a deal breaker. And this would have been a great little car to, for a second car to replace the XC90. As you know, I'm looking for something that's not an XC90, but will very probably just end up with another XC90.
Something new, something like an XC90, but something new. Yeah, well, I'm very curious to keep my eyes out for this one here in suburban Florida. I am curious, do you have a sense of how much they're selling it, how much they're pushing it and selling it?
I've seen quite a few of these, but it's deceptive because there's a gas version and an EV version, and it's not super obvious. It is from behind.
How do you identify it? Because I want to.
Well, the gas one has exhaust tips.
There's no like special EV marking on it or something either.
Doesn't seem to be. The grill is open, so the grill on the EV one is like a little bit plasticky, and from the rear you can see that one has very prominent sporty exhaust tips and the other one has no exhaust.
Okay.
But that's about it. So if you're on the road, one passes you or you see one over there in traffic, it's hard to tell which one it is. But I also live very close to a Genesis dealer. So you would think that there would be a lot more Genesis in my neighborhood, just simply because of that, because of the location, right? So like, the Volvo dealer here is at 1140 and I'm at 540. So I'm 6 blocks away.
Yeah.
The Genesis store is kind of similar. So I see a lot of Genesis and Volvo cars in the neighborhood.
Interesting. We'll keep an eye. I always like to spot a new EV and I don't think I've seen one. So either I've seen them and I haven't realized it, which I would be ashamed to admit, or
that's not the kind of obsession we're looking for here on EV Obsession.
Exactly. I pride myself on being able to spot any EV anywhere from 3 miles away.
Yeah, I can't do that.
No, not.
I'm like, that's a Model Y. It's a Model 3. How about that one? That's a Model S. What about that one? That's a Model X. Have I seen any Model Y?
To me, it's so fun because I had fun doing it with Teslas, but they're everywhere. And nowadays, there's so many non-Tesla EVs, and I'm just so excited to see all these other EVs growing in adoption. It's really exciting. So this is an interesting one you pulled. This is actually on a Spanish website,
Motor Pasión. This is actually a really great site. They find a lot of really good news stories. They find a lot of good scoops, but obviously they're in Spanish, so don't go there. Go to Clean Technica. If it's interesting, I will definitely have it there in English.
I feel like I may have seen a press release about them doing gigacasting, or maybe that was someone else. I'm not sure. It's not just Tesla now, but this is what the story is about, right?
Yeah. Well, Tesla wasn't even first. The first ones were Lamborghini and Audi to use a gigacasting for the rear subframe on the V10 platform that eventually became the Gallardo and the R8. That was really, and that's why, when Tesla went looking for a giga press, essentially they had to go to Italy because that's who had done it before. So this is a gigacasting that is going to be in the new Volvo EX90, which is the fully electric version of the 90 that's coming out. They are dropping even the hybrid version where it's going to be pure EV play. All of Volvo's cars are going to be a pure EV play. It's going to be really interesting, but you can get a sense there of what component is going to be cast. That's really interesting because I think that's going to lead to a much more rigid rear structure there. I think it's going to lead to more cargo capacity. So I like it. I think this is exciting news. And as legacy manufacturers continue to see that things can be done differently to the way that they've always done them, they're going to adopt what works for them, especially from, copying Tesla. And then the question is going to become, will a lot of this stuff translate to the same kind of success, or is it just going to make everything kind of cheaper?
Well, I have a few comments on this, but who did you say Lamborghini and who else was doing?
So Lamborghini's parent company is Volkswagen Audi. So it was their
They were the one,
vehicles. Yeah, they were, well,
but
they
did
worked
they?
with an Italian supplier to make this for Lamborghini. And when Lamborghini was purchased by the Volkswagen Group, they decided to also make an Audi and a VW Nardo concept that never made it to production. But they
Oh,
also made the Audi R8 that was a mechanical clone of the Lamborghini Gallardo. And the
but
Audi
did
came
they?
with the V8, the and a V10 later, and the Gallardo did that.
But did they coin the term gigacasting?
No, they did not. They just had a large casting.
It's funny how Tesla does that. Elon
Oh,
does
they're
that,
so good. This isn't a
and then
mega
everyone
factory. It's a
starts using it.
gigafactory. Of
Yeah.
course, everyone starts using it because it's so good. Like, here's the
Well,
problem.
I thought you hated the gigafactory term because you're like, it's just a factory, but
It's just a
like,
factory.
and it's funny too because it's
I
a
can hate it and
gigafactory because
admit that it's
they
good.
produce gigawatt hours of batteries, but then but then Elon hated the term nanoscale or nano anything. It's like, dude, you're coining stuff all the time.
Hi, my name is Scott Cooney. I started Clean Technica to promote clean energy and other sustainable alternatives, and for 13 years we've been moving markets. If we had a nickel for every time someone told us they bought their first EV, solar, e-bike, or fill in the blank clean energy solution, we'd be a cable TV channel by now. But we don't get those nickels. So unfortunately, we could use your help to reach a few more people. If just 1% of our audience chipped in a few bucks a month, we could hire dozens of great journalists and promote all sorts of climate solutions. It's easy. Just go to cleantechnica.com/support and sign up with a credit card in seconds. Cancel anytime. But we'll be sending out some cool perks too, so I think you'll want to stick around. With your support, we'll keep leading the charge. Thank you so much.
The two things on the, so one here, I just, the only thing about this, I don't see where they're gonna sit comfortably in this car because I don't see seats in it.
They're gonna sit well ahead of that.
This is maybe a place to roll in what we were talking about with with before the show. But the serious comment I have, aside from bad dad jokes, this what I like about gigacasting this here is it looks like it's fairly quite protected.
Yeah,
And my concern with some of the gigacasting is damage to it requires like so much replacement.
yeah,
And this is like, okay, this shouldn't get damaged. So it shouldn't, you shouldn't have to
yeah.
replace this giant. I mean, I understand there's been arguments like it doesn't matter or whatever, that you have to replace a lot anyway when there's a bunch of parts. But yeah, that's my thought on it. It's a good placement for it.
There's a very interesting difference too if you look at Volvo
Jeez.
versus Tesla in the way they're manufactured. Volvo does not use a skateboard chassis. They have what Lotus would have called a backbone chassis, very similar to how the Lotus Elise was built, the original Tesla Roadster was built, and that has sort of gone from Lotus to Volvo, and especially from Lotus to Polestar. And it's a different way of building an EV where it's still like a tube that goes down the middle of the car. All the batteries are in there. They're safer from side impacts. They're more resilient to, impact protection and things like that. And it's going to be interesting to see as they start to roll out the EX90 and things like that with this gigacasting process. If they eventually do go to that skateboard, I believe the CX30 is a little more skateboard E, but it'll be interesting to see how that translates into the next generation of like SPA 2 vehicles or SPA 3 vehicles.
Yeah, so this is again Google translation of the Spanish. I don't know how it was worded in Spanish, but I like how it's worded here. They say the Geely or Volvo Cars has begun to install 2 huge machines baptized by Tesla as Gigapress in its factory in Gothenburg, Sweden. So right now, this is just 2 machines in Sweden. But I assume if it goes well, this will become more standard, not just at Volvo Cars, but at other Geely brands.
Yeah, you'll see this in the new Zeekers and Geelys and things like that. Oh, I got to tell you, yeah, and I think you saw this, the Zeekr one that we were talking about the other day. They have a new Go Fast race car version of the Zeekr one, as if it wasn't already bonkers fast enough, and they're trying to steal all the thunder from the Tesla Plaid and the Lucid Sapphire. So that thing's going to get flown out to California to do a run at like Willow Springs. I'm going to be really excited when that happens. I'm trying to get out there. We'll see.
So referencing back to my ridiculous comment about no seats here, we were talking before the show, and we're going to work this in. These Amber Alerts.
It's going in whether you like it or not.
These Amber Alerts you get on your phone, they're like blast your phone. So in Florida, they've been doing tests. They do regular testing of this to make sure it's working. I don't understand, but the state, someone at the state does this.
Yeah, they like to play with they like to press the button that they've been given. Exactly.
Yeah. So first of all, they made a mistake like 6 months ago, and they did it at like 2 or 3 a.m. and like everybody's phones went berserk at 2 or 3 a.m. and everybody was pissed off, like what the heck is going on? It was a mistake on their end. And then last week they were doing another test, and it notified people, oh, there's going to be a test at this time. So a bunch of people, as far as I know, all right-wing people, have been concerned that if you leave your phone on at that time, they're collecting data on you, they're tracking, that makes them able to track you. And they were telling, turn your phone off before this happens, for this time period, so that they don't track you. There's so many levels of bonkers with this. Joe had his head down before the show. He's like, I can't. I mean, first of all, if they're sending you this, they already have you in their system.
But like, of course they have you in their system. Like when you go and get a cell phone, you give them your social security number, your credit card, your name and address. If you pay for a phone, they have you in the system. And here's a shocker for everybody out there. If you're on a burner phone and you go on Instagram, they have your data for that too.
And yeah, listen, if they subpoena your phone records, they can just go get them, because
my favorite, I heard somebody who was wearing an Apple Watch say something about data to me, and I had to explain to them. I was like, you understand your Apple Watch knows where you are, how fast you're going, who you're with, and can get a pretty good sense of what you're doing. So there is actually a file out there, a biometric algorithm that tries to figure out not only how often you're having sex, but who you're having sex with. And Nissan and Kia got into really big trouble because no, this is real. Nissan and Kia recently had a real big issue with this, and it was in the Mozilla report that they were collecting data about sexual activity and sexual partners and sharing it. The cars were collecting that data and sharing it with the manufacturer so that they could better market and target you for different marketing.
I know some Tesla drivers got busted for cheating because their spouse, was like, oh, I'm going to check on the car.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But in this case, like, also, secondly, like, these are right-wing people, and they're concerned about Governor DeSantis and his admin tracking you. I'm like, second level of like, what? And third, it's just like, how are they tracking you by sending you a test Amber Alert alarm? Like, how is that tracked? Like, do you know anything about how technology works? But it was a widespread thing. People were turning off their phones here in Florida. Like, it was pretty, I mean, it's just, and then you had your own story where, I don't know if you want to mention that one, but
no, it's just too upsetting. I got to tell you, man, you get to the point with these people where you have to just ask yourself, have you ever lived a single day on Earth? Like, is this your first time to this planet? Thank you for adopting human form so that I can be more comfortable around you. But really, please go back to whatever ridiculous, mentally deficient space alien form you actually possess so that I can understand when I'm talking to you that I'm not talking to an actual human being.
Yeah. So last story of the day, we have some electric or efficient long haul trucks that Steve Hanley wrote about. One is this Volvo, which looks very cool, but it's not electric. It's apparently very efficient.
Well, hang
but
on. It's not electric, but it's 130% more efficient than a standard diesel Volvo, LR truck. And it or it's a Mac LR, but it's 134% more efficient than the benchmark. And it's doing that with what is effectively bodywork. Right. So this is something where, you want to talk about reducing hydrocarbons and you want to talk about, reducing the use of energy and oil. What if we could still have the same amount of trucks on the road today, but use 40% as much fuel? That's a tremendous savings in not only emissions, but cost savings as well. So I think this is a legitimate thing to cover. This is absolutely clean tech. I know it's not a BEV, but there are instances where improvements can be made, and I, maybe like Steve, believe that we should celebrate every improvement. That said, Volvo is really my thing. I don't know if Steve should have written that. Should have asked permission first.
You see the guards along the side blocking the wheels, increasing aerodynamics. You can see there, I didn't notice it before, U.S. Department of Energy seal. There's a Volvo SuperTruck 2. To mute this, and then we can see it's a long video, 3 minutes.
That's all right. We just have it playing in the background while we talk.
So yeah, I mean, the trucks create so much emission, so any big improvements like this are
and it's not useful. A 30% improvement, it's 130% improvement.
Yeah, and it's not a concept truck, they say right away. This is and it's, I mean, at this stage we're not electrifying all the trucks in the world. Like, we're not even close to that. Like,
we'll get to that. I think,
but we're not even close to it. So for now, this is really important for cutting emissions.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out that this is not the only SuperTruck program out there. Kenworth has one as well. There's a couple of different SuperTrucks that are similar to this, but I do believe that Volvo's is really the one that's on the cutting edge there.
Wait, you think Volvo's the leader?
I do.
When is that ever the case?
International Navistar has a SuperTruck 2 as well. That's kind of goofy looking. It doesn't cover the tandem axles, but it does have a different shape trailer that integrates real nicely within the back of the sleeper cab fairing. So that's a really solid vehicle. And then Peterbilt.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And then Peterbilt has a SuperTruck as well that they showed off at the ATA's Fleet Owner Show recently. That one does have the rear wheel spats. It's got a little bit more aggressive styling, a deep cut rear window. That really looks like something super future-y, kind of in line with the Tesla Semi. So there's a couple of trucks that are out there, but they're just not posting the kind of numbers. And they're all, by the way, part of the same DOE project. The SuperTruck 2 program is something the Department of Energy has done. I just think Volvo knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I love the skin on it. I would like to see them use that like on all trucks, because like, why make trucks ugly and why not show off what you're doing better?
Why make trucks ugly? That's a great question.
No, I just like it. It's really like, wouldn't it be nicer if all the trucks around you on the highway are looking like that instead of the other way? I also thought it was nice that a few Volvo engineers could stand around laughing. Like, that's just a nice feel-good moment, right?
It is. We're going to actually be interviewing those guys tomorrow. I'll be interviewing them for a while, and we'll talk to them. We'll talk to Dr. Ray Gallant, and that's going to be really exciting. I'm so excited about that. I can't even tell you. And,
we should have started with this story. I didn't realize that. I love the pictures over the bridge too.
They didn't pay us to start with the story.
Yeah, exactly. So there is another truck. This video is almost over. The other truck that Steve wrote about is a full electric from Mercedes. I don't know. This is the image of it. Very different look.
Have you seen the interior of it yet? Because my experience with Mercedes trucks, and especially even Mercedes cars in Europe, has been that they're a lot more basic than what we get here in the States. And I just wonder, because this is primarily, there you go. Yeah. That's nice.
You ask and ye shall receive.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
That
Because I
looked
hadn't seen that.
cool.
That looks
That's
decent.
like I would like to sit there.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, it's a little basic, if you really start getting into these custom sleeper
Ooh.
trucks, you get into like the Freightliners and everything. They've got the wood dash, the leather, the quilted leather in there. They've got the custom sleeper beds. This is cool, but it's
That
still pretty basic, but it's less basic than I thought it would be.
that has a sleeper bed with the Mercedes logo on it on the sheets. That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah, it's all right. I like it. That's a nice little truck. I think it's technically a class 8, but it's a lot smaller than the kind of semis that we're used to here. It's cab over versus conventional. It doesn't have the tandem axle, so it's a 6-wheeler, not a 10-wheeler kind of thing. But as far as Europe goes, and a lot of these older cities globally, you're going to see a ton of these. And 600-mile range, that's a great operating
No,
range.
it's 500 kilometers or 310 miles.
Oh, I thought it was. I read that as 500 miles. I'm sorry.
I was just checking real quick to see
Yeah,
what that.
yeah. But even
So,
that, I mean, you're
but
not
it's
running this thing from Texas to Los Angeles. You're running
yeah.
it from London to Brighton, and that's plenty for that.
Plus, there's regulations on how long drivers can drive in Europe, and basically, I think that would work for a professional driver. But yeah, I think it looks really cool. I wonder about the aerodynamics after looking at that Volvo SuperTruck. Like, could they have? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a truck expert, but it looks cool. It has a cool look again, which I like because it's like, yeah, trucks should look cool. They're everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
at least make them look cool.
The primary concern in Europe is maneuverability, which is why you have that cab over design so the driver has better visibility, and the by putting that nose right above the wheels, you can see exactly where it's going, because the roads in the cities are just a lot tighter than they are here in the States. So that's why you're not seeing that emphasis on that, and why you're not seeing like that bullet streamliner kind of shape. But
Yeah, this is
it's a
more
hot
for
truck.
city, more city driving, less
Exactly.
on the interstate all the time. It says more than 80% CO2 savings compared to a diesel truck over entire life cycle. But that's cool stuff. 600 kilowatt hour battery. Yeah, the e-Actros 600. So very cool. That's our story. Unless you want to mention the guy who thought EVs are a gateway to pedophilia.
I don't want to give that idiot a platform.
Okay, yeah, we shouldn't do that. But that was the other bonkers. Yeah, that's it. So that's our show. Enjoy.
That's our show.
Oh, I
One
was
last
say,
thing
enjoy
I'm
your
dropping.
Weekend, but it's not Friday. It's
not
Thursday.
Friday yet. It's like the never-ending week. It's like
this is.
It's.
Are you
this
having
is like,
that effect?
No, this is like
Marika?
the 4th Monday in a row for me.
Oh, Marika and I all week we're thinking like it's the day before, the day later, or a day or two later than it is. It's so weird how that happens, and it affects like everybody.
Yeah, it just gets worse and worse. I think that's what we need to say. It just gets worse and worse. Every time they turn on the Large Hadron Collider, the Berenstein Bears get spelled differently again. Curious George loses a tail, and we all think it's Tuesday.
Yeah, we need to like solve that scientifically and like win a Nobel Prize for like the theory of time warp.
Oh, I'm gonna solve it. I'm just gonna dig a hole into the middle of the collider and fill it with cement. I'm done with this thing. I do not care about the Higgs boson. Move on.
About the what?
The Higgs boson.
Oh, okay, yes.
I don't care.
All right, I don't either.
Yeah.
No offense to people who do. I think it's interesting that people work on it and do it. But
yeah, did you know the Higgs boson was Catholic?
I don't know.
Because it has mass.
Oh my!
Yay!
I took you seriously for a minute. That was a mistake. All right, peace.